To D7 or not to D7? That will be the question in the coming months and years for potential digital nomads that want to make Portugal their home. Roll that intro. Hello there, I'm Rafael Furia, back at it again for another Friday night for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. This week I wanted to do a quick mini episode just to talk a little bit about the new digital nomad visa, not the D7. There's a lot of people that have branded the D7 as a digital nomad visa, when it's really been more aimed at retirees or people earning a passive income. But for those people who would like to live and work here actively, it really seems like there's an interesting fine line between them. This episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter is not about how to get the digital nomad visa. It's not about how to get the D7. I just wanted to share some of my opinions as someone who's been living abroad long term. This is kind of almost a part 3 to the most recent videos I've been doing, other than the last episode that I did with Border, where we did that interview that I shared, which if you haven't seen it, by the way, it seems as though it didn't get sent out to a lot of people, so be sure to check out that episode. I'll try to remember to put a link up in the corner, and also maybe a link down below in the more info section on YouTube. So to just jump right into this new digital nomad visa seems to me, this is just my opinion, it seems to me as though this new digital nomad visa is more aimed towards a specific segment of digital nomads, not just anybody who is working remotely, but those who earn a little bit more than maybe the average might. Not to say that these would be necessarily high net worth individuals or high income earners, but these individuals might be earning quite a bit more than what a lot of people around the world, especially in Portugal, would earn. From what I've been seeing, it seems like it's either $2,750 or $2,800 or euros, whatever. It's not important. The difference between $2,700 and €2,800 at this moment in time is, I would say, almost negligible for that person. It's not going to make a big difference in lifestyle, but this is already multiple times higher than the minimum salary here in Portugal. And I would say more than double of the average income in the country. So it is interesting to me to see that it almost seems as though that based on how things were with the D7, there were a lot of people able to come here. You just had to show that you're earning enough money and that it was, €705, something like this. So for a lot of people who are working remotely, it probably wouldn't be the most difficult thing to be able to show. However, again, the D7 is more meant for not necessarily people who are actively working. Even I've heard murmurs from here and there that some people are now having a little bit of a difficult time with the D7 if they are actively earning an income. But that's not something that I can say is an absolute fact with complete certainty. But again, whispers, murmurs of things that I've been hearing. As many people are aware that there's been a lot of immigration to Portugal, a lot of people coming to make it their home, which is not inherently a negative thing. However, because there are so many people coming here from other parts of the world that may have a different level of income, which may allow them to have higher spending power. So this almost seems to lead the way into some of the issues that we are seeing now, where we're seeing the cost of living going up, prices of apartments raising. Also, of course, we have to take inflation and some of the global events and current things going on into consideration. But in some areas, just from my opinion, based on what I've seen, is that it's kind of going up maybe at a rate higher than it really should be. And it seems as though it could be possible that this has come under some sort of flack. I'll admit I don't know the full situation, but just actually the day of recording this, there was an article on the Portugal news, and there's been a ton of articles, and I'm not going to go through this whole article, but the importance of the digital nomad visa for Portugal. The Prime Minister has defended the tax permanence regime granted to so-called digital nomads residing in the country, considering it essential. Again, this is from the Portugal News Daily. And rather than going through the whole article, I just want to focus on one quote, because the thing about the Portugal News is it's the translation. So I figured in this case, it's probably the most appropriate just to refer to this one because it's already translated. Either we want to be a country close to the world that is killing our history, culture, and vocation, or we want to be what we have become, an open country where everyone feels welcome, where everyone can develop their life projects. And so for me, it feels a little bit funny. My assumption based on what they wrote is that this little blurb is in defense of this new visa, but of course, with the news, you never know if it's taken in from something else, and so whatever. I'm not going to get into that aspect of things, but if it were about opening up Portugal, then I think it might be fair to say that creating this new financial requirement might not necessarily be something that opens things up. And I'm not saying that there should or shouldn't be. It almost seems to me to be at least slightly counterintuitive. And so then my question becomes, is it really just focusing on being open to a certain segment of the world's population? Again, not saying bad or good here, but of course, if you have any opinions on this, be sure that you let me know down in the comment section below here on YouTube, because of course this is an open conversation. So it would almost seem as though that this would be limiting the amount of people that would actually be able to make their way here, which in a way theoretically could be a good thing to limit the numbers of people who are driving the costs of living up. And even though the overall number of people that are able to come might be limited, the people who would be able to come might be higher earners, which might be able to price the locals out in a way that it's not about fair competition, but my concern is its ability to push up the barrier to entry, even with fewer people, might be moving at a similar, if not faster rate. But of course, this is all just theoretical, and this would depend on how many people are able to come here. If it is an extreme drop in the amount of people who are trying to get this D7. But even then, a lot of the people who are eligible for the D7 still are able to out-compete some of the local spending power that you might find. And not that the math would line up this way, but thinking about it from the perspective of the minimum level, the minimum financial requirement for each of these visas, like with the basic minimum income being reached for the D7, and then also this new level of $2,750 or $2,800 for this new digital nomad visa, we're talking about like what, 3 times roughly? So maybe from a tax collection standpoint, every 3 D7s would be equal to like 1 digital nomad visa. Is that a thing? Will that be a thing? That's something I'm wondering. I'm wondering if things are being looked at from that perspective. Again, the numbers may not really line up with that, to be completely fair, but just looking at it from that minimum value that it adds theoretically to the country from a financial level, it is interesting to look at that as well. But will this new digital nomad visa hurt or help? I can only say that I really hope that it helps, because we are seeing numbers grow here at what almost could be an unsustainable level. I mean, even if we look at the immigration service, CEF, they've been bogged down, and even to the extent of instead being able to have an appointment in the city where maybe you're residing, maybe you have to go to the opposite end of the country or to a random village in the middle of nowhere that nobody's ever heard of. But okay, maybe not to a place that nobody's ever heard of, but to a place that is maybe a bit out of the way. So could this be put in place as a limiting factor to maybe help decrease the number overall of people who are needing appointments with CEF? That's something that I'll be very interested to see as time goes on, because it does seem as though the rate at which people from other countries are moving to Portugal has been growing and growing and growing. Granted, I'm one of them, but at the same time, I moved to Portugal for it to be Portugal. I would hate for it to become something else. And like I've mentioned in previous episodes, I was very disappointed with what I saw in Lisbon. It's one of my favorite places, but at the same time, I've been disappointed to see how much more touristy it's become over the years since I was last there. And so where I'm coming from is that I would hate to see the same thing happen in other parts of the country, even though it's already starting, if not already has happened, depending on where you are. But anyway, I think this is where I'm going to wrap up this mini episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. And of course, if you have any opinions on this, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. It's always interesting to hear different perspectives, and I'm not saying that I'm right on everything or that I have all of the right answers. And there have been times where a comment has completely changed my opinion on something. Not often, but it can happen. But anyway, I think it's about time that we wrap this episode up. So thank you all so much for joining for another Friday night. And of course, a huge thank you to those of you who helped to make these episodes possible through Patreon, patreon.com/Rafael Di Furia, rafaeldifuria.com/Patreon, as well as the thanks button down in the comment section below on YouTube. All of these greatly help this project to be able to continue, as well as the likes, shares, and those of you who are subscribed. Thank you all so very, very much. Of course, I'm Rafael Di Furia. This is another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Stay safe and healthy, and I will see you all next time. Later.